There you go. You're set.
DHHS just not on the ball on it, guys.
Starts in the morning.
It's a snowstorm. We'll give them.
Yeah, that's right. I'll get 2 of the 3 members of DHHS.
Okay, if you're batting 337, you're all.
That's right, you're Hall of Famer.
So, all right, so this meeting is being held virtually and in person and is hosted by the Utah Department of Health and Human Services Center for Medical Cannabis based in Salt Lake City, Utah. Public notice of this meeting was provided as required in Utah's open meeting laws and was posted on the Utah Public Notice website. In compliance with Utah's open meetings law, this meeting is being recorded. A recording of this meeting will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days following the date of this meeting. A rough draft copy of the unapproved written minutes will be posted to the Public Notice website within 30 days of this meeting. Approved minutes will be posted to the Utah Public Notice website no later than 3 business days after board approval. Every proposed agenda item must have a 1-page summary of the topic submitted to MCPAB@utah.gov no later than 7 days prior to the board meeting. Board members will present the 1-page summary during board meetings and board members will discuss the summary. If no written summary is provided to board staff, the relevant agenda item will be removed from the agenda. Only items that have been submitted in writing in advance of board meetings will be allowed during discussion by the board chair, including presentations to the public. Board members will then request additional presentation and memorandums on the agenda item from relevant bodies to be presented at the next board meeting. Those presentation memos will also need to be submitted to MCPAB@utah.gov 7 days prior to the board meeting. Public comments will be limited to 2 minutes per person. If you want more time, you must request it from the chair, and the chair may accept or reject requests for additional time. A public comment period is not guaranteed every meeting. The chair has the authority to create or remove public comment period from the agenda or during the meeting. You can look over public comment guidelines that are posted on the Utah Public Notice website. Please state your name and your affiliation when making a public comment so it can be reflected in the meeting minutes. Only comments made on items listed on the agenda will be considered. If you have a comment about an item not listed on the agenda, please email them to mcpab@utah.gov. How to make a comment over Zoom. The Zoom public chat will be disabled during Zoom meetings. When the chair indicates it is time for public comments, you will use the raise hand icon on Zoom to indicate that you would like to make a comment. When you are called upon, you will be taken off mute, then take 2 minutes to make your comment. Please fill out the public comment sign-in sheet if you wish to make a comment in person. And indicate what agenda item you would like to make a comment on. The chair will indicate when it is time for public comment period. The board chair will call on you when it is your turn, and you will come to the public comment table, take 2 minutes to make your comment. As a reminder, if you're in person, please do not speak when others are presenting. Our mics are very sensitive, and those attending over Zoom cannot hear when there is more than 1 person talking at a time. Side conversations and comments from the public during this board meeting are prohibited. Please use a voice that is louder than your typical one when speaking, commenting, or presenting. When you speak, please lean towards the table as if there were a microphone. For additional information, to make a suggestion for agenda items, or to contact board members or staff, please send an email to MCPAB@utah.gov. And with that, we'll go ahead and get this already started. Go forward to the item of approval of the February 2025 minutes. All those in attendance, if you have an opportunity to glance over the minutes and any modifications or changes. If not, I'll look for a recommendation.
So moved.
Has been seconded. All those in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Misty, and thank you, Kat. And Des, please, oh, Chris, we got everyone here. So, all right, we'll go ahead and move on to administrative business, which at this time we don't have anything to discuss.
The only thing I wanted to ask about is last time we talked about kind of re-executing the conflict of interest forms. If we don't have that ready for this meeting, I thought we talked about maybe you guys bringing forms for us to execute this time. I thought we talked about that, maybe I'm completely wrong. I know you guys sent out what we had executed, and for instance, I noticed like my home address has changed, and the Utah Campus Association doesn't exist anymore, so obviously we need to update that form. So if next time we could have the forms for us to just all fill out.
I think we talked about it be in July.
Oh, we
When,
got it.
we'll do it
Yeah,
every year in
okay.
July
Yeah.
when we renew.
Okay,
That's what we did.
Yes,
Okay.
that was the discussion,
sounds good. Well,
so. Okay. Um. Anything else from the board? If not, we'll move on to the next item. We will have an update from the Department of Health and Human Services and from Mr. Oborn.
Okay, so just a few statistics that I'll share as of today. On March 18th, we have 97,300 active medical cannabis cards. And as of the end of the month in February, last month, there were 94,190 at that time. So we've increased by about 3,000 just since the beginning of the month. And if we take a look at February, in February, 54% of active medical cannabis card holders registered with DHHS made at least one purchase. And compared to January, we were at 55%. In January, February, we were at 54%. There's 958 qualified medical providers registered in the program as of the end of February, and 85 pharmacy medical providers as of the end of February. Medical provider outreach. As a reminder, there is a medical provider quarterly virtual meeting on April 10th at 8 a.m. That's for registered qualified medical providers, pharmacy medical providers in the program. Also, QMP proxies, those that work with medical providers, they're invited as well. And also those involved at the clinics, clinic owners. And we sent out a blast email the first time we did this meeting, and the meeting was well attended. And I think we've done 2 or 3 meetings since then. We've done them quarterly. And so we will, 2 weeks before the meeting, which is, I believe, next week, we'll send out an email to remind the QMPs and PMPs and QMP proxies and those that registered to be notified about the meeting so they can join. And the agenda will cover some of the new statutes that provided the bills move forward. And they're not vetoed, which we don't expect that. So we'll discuss those new statutes, and then we'll also discuss some EBS enhancements, and a few other items are on that agenda. We also record those meetings so individuals can listen to, and we take minutes of those meetings so people can review those minutes after in case they're not able to come to that meeting on April 10th. Also in May, Dr. Matt McKiff, he is presenting at 2 conferences of medical providers at the Utah Nurse Practitioner Pharmacology Conference on May 16th. And then also at the Ogden Medical Surgical Society meeting on May 15th. And then the final item was just the Cannabis Research Review Board meeting is scheduled for April 8th. So that's in 2 weeks. And at that meeting, the board plans to do a final review of the PTSD document, suggested guidelines that they have for PTSD. And then there's a review of the epilepsy guidance document that they plan to discuss on their agenda. Also, Valerie at the University of Utah Center for Medical Cannabis Research, she'll be sharing information about the transition plan that they have as duties of that of the CRB are moving over to the University of Utah Center for Medical Cannabis Research. So that'll be on the agenda as well. So if you're interested in any of those topics, we encourage you to join. And that will likely be the final meeting of the Cannabis Research Review Board, as legislation has that board sunsetting in July. And yeah, that's all.
Okay.
Any questions?
Thank you, Rich.
Yeah.
We'll go ahead, move on to Dr. Forsythe.
Not a whole lot from us today. We have kind of broken record with the ICS at this point. No progress, well, minimal progress has been made on the conversion of the data over to the new system. We're looking at a new strategy for that. We should have some more information on that next time. We're sensitive that to the fact that 420 is coming up. in the next couple weeks. And so we are going to do our best to avoid any kind of go live action that would interfere with that. But we should have more information for the next meeting. And then the next Cannabis Establishment Licensing Board meeting, I believe, will be on April 9th from 2 to 4. For those interested in doing that, should be a fairly quiet one, but that's about it. Unless there's any questions.
Dr. Forsyth, I got a question about,
Yeah.
just MJ Freeway in general. Obviously, I know that they're still our service provider, and we reached out to them, and we reached out to them on a couple of issues. And essentially, the consensus, is number one, they're not making any changes that aren't directly from the department, and I can understand that. But there's generally a hesitancy on their part to do anything new and or to fix issues. A great example is, MJ Freeway does not populate all of the terpenes, right, that appear on a COA.
Yeah.
And so if you use MJ Freeway data to populate your fact panels, you do not get complete data. So not only are you not getting correct totals for your terpenes, but you're also not able to list the top 5 without obviously doing some sort of manual process. And so I guess just more than anything, just agreeing to that. And if it's gonna, go on for who knows how much longer, not having any real responsiveness for them while at the same time now, as you're aware, seeing performance issues, continue to mount with them. Just more so wanted to, not really a question, but more so just, put that in your ear, because it's been a struggle. And to know that system is, we're supposed to maintain, compliance with a non-compliant system, or a less than helpful system, just is really difficult for us as operators.
Yeah, I can certainly understand that.
Any other questions? If not, we will go ahead and move on to the next topic, which is the medical cannabis market analysis, and I'll turn the back time over to, do we have someone from the University of Utah that's going to present, or is it just going to be the Farm Valley one?
Yeah, she planned to join virtually, and I know she's planning on 2:30. Abby, can you see that she's joined already?
Need that intro.
We're just a little bit ahead.
Whoa.
Already 2 minutes late. So
Moving fast.
That's the.
We have Brittany. Let's do Brittany first.
So we're gonna move
Yeah.
5B up to 5A.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so if you'll track down Brittany's and make her a presenter.
She should be.
Okay.
Hi, everybody. All right. So I'm Brittany Brown. I am the EPI manager for our DHHS Office of Health Equity, and I'm not super familiar with Zoom, so see if I can get this shared. Okay. Can you see the survey
Yeah.
summary document? Okay, thank you. All right,
Can you hear
perfect.
us okay, Brittany?
Yes.
Great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So, my team is helping Rich's team, at the Center for Medical Cannabis with developing, a survey that we're planning to administer to medical providers that are not currently participating in as a registered medical provider in the medical cannabis program. And I apologize if I don't use the right terminology because I am just getting familiar with the Center for Medical Cannabis. So we have been drafting this survey and wanted to make sure that you all were aware and provide an opportunity to share any feedback that you might have on the information that we're planning to collect.
Brittany,
So-
would you?
Yes.
Sorry, Brittany, I just want to ask, could you zoom in a little bit? It's a little difficult to see here in the room and on Zoom.
Yes, absolutely. Is
That's
that
much
good?
better. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So generally, the purpose of this survey is to understand from medical providers that are not currently participating in the program as a referring physician, why that is and kind of the barriers that they may be experiencing, their perceptions about medical cannabis, including efficacy, other potential concerns that they may have with prescribing medical cannabis to qualifying patients. And then we plan to use this information to inform strategies that we can, potentially work toward addressing some of these concerns or barriers that medical providers might have with medical cannabis in the program, as well as try to understand how we can increase awareness about medical cannabis and the program in Utah among more medical providers. We plan to, following this survey, identify some key areas that we want to understand a little bit more, and then we'll plan to do some one-on-one interviews with some providers to delve a little bit deeper into some of those topic areas through some qualitative data collection and analysis. So, general summary of the types of questions that we're planning to ask. The first section just asked about general awareness and their participation in the program. So are basically, how familiar are you with the Utah Medical Cannabis Program? And then this is the point where we'll weed out any providers that are already participating in the program and assess the remaining providers. The next section goes into their perceptions of medical cannabis. So trying to understand, if they believe medical cannabis can be an effective treatment for patients with certain conditions, how familiar they are with the research surrounding medical cannabis, and trying to understand why maybe they might be choosing not to participate in the program, if it's just a lack of awareness of our program or if there's other reasons that may be contributing to that decision. So just a couple examples of some of the questions included in that section, asking about, their agreement with medical cannabis as a treatment option for certain conditions, as well as the safety of medical cannabis for patients with certain conditions. The next section is assessing barriers to participation in the state program. So really trying to identify specific reasons why they are not participating, and other concerns such as lack of awareness and knowledge, federal legality potential concerns, fears of misuse of patients, not knowing how to, appropriately prescribe it to their patients, those types of things. And so an example there is, what are the main reasons you're not participating in the Utah Medical Cannabis Program, and asking them to select up to 3 options there. The next section is assessing their willingness or how likely they feel they might be to participate in the medical cannabis program over the next 12 months. So really trying to understand, are there certain things that might have an impact on their willingness to participate in the program if we were able to increase awareness, increase access to information, or different things like that. So some examples there are, how likely would you be to participate in the Utah Medical Cannabis Program in the next 12 months? And then what factors would make you more likely to participate in the Utah Medical Cannabis Program? Then finally, the last few sections are more demographics and trying to understand where they get information about medical cannabis currently, as well as how often their patients are asking them about medical cannabis as a potential treatment option, and if they do ask, how do they respond to those patients? Do they refer them to other, referring providers? Do they just tell them, I don't recommend it, there's not enough research, I'm not a provider, so trying to understand that as well. And then finally, also trying to understand from their perspective, what are the best ways to share information with medical providers about medical cannabis and about our program here in Utah. Then collecting information about their professional backgrounds and demographics, what type of specialty they work in, their licensure, whether they accept patients with Medicaid and Medicare, and then where they did their medical education, if it was in-state, out-of-state, the zip code, in county of the clinic where they are currently practicing, so we can identify any trends regionally or by rurality and things like that across the state among providers. And then finally, we are going to also ask about willingness to participate in, like I mentioned, a more in-depth interview in the future if they're willing to kind of talk through some of their perspectives a little bit more in depth with us. So that is a high-level overview. Happy to answer any questions that you might have. Rich, if you have anything you want to add. And then, yeah, we can go over the process for providing feedback. But I'll pause and see if there's any questions about the survey itself.
Yeah, Brittany, I think you did a great job of summarizing the outline here, and board is welcome to ask any questions.
So my guess is these are just sample questions, not all the questions that will be asked. Will we get a chance to review the actual survey itself with all the questions included once it's ready?
We can share those with you later, but what we felt like was really important is to share with the board the concept, right? If the concept, if you have concerns with some of the sections, or you wanted to make sure that there's a specific question that is asked, now would be the time to mention that.
For sure, but
Yeah.
I hope at some point we get to see the actual survey with all of the questions, so we can just.
Right, and there's a lot of different factors involved in deciding which questions, like this has to go through the review of an IRB, and so that would be the final review of that. But we would rather catch something if there's a specific question that the industry or patient advocates or whatever stakeholder wants asked, that now or prior to April 1st would be the time to share that. We understand that this is the first time we're sharing this concept with you in the level of detail. So we understand those ideas may not come during this meeting. So that's why that's why we're asking that by Tuesday, April 1 at 5, that we get any feedback by then. So you're welcome to share it with others in the industry that may not be able to be at this meeting, right? Or patients.
Yeah, I think the thing that I like about this survey, as opposed to the next one we're going to talk about, is it's more subjective, right? It's trying to get better at perceptions around cannabis and perceptions of the program than otherwise objective data that we already have access to. For instance, how far do you have to drive to get to your nearest medical cannabis pharmacy? We already have data that's either going to tell us that or that you can use to tell us that information.
Sure.
I like the questions in here because they're trying to get far more at opinions and perceptions, because I think, as we all know, the world seems to operate far more on perception and opinion, especially in this space, than it always does on verifiable and objective data. So I do appreciate that. I think my feedback would be delving in a little bit more around, asking the providers about, for instance, have you ever treated a patient who was having success using medical cannabis? You're not their QMP, right? And you're not their, I guess RMP is now the correct term to use, or that they wanted to try cannabis, but you didn't offer to give them, a medical cannabis card, or if you refer them to, to an RMP. Have you ever recommended that a patient look into cannabis, but you were not the one to make, the official recommendation, or refer them to, to a QMP? And then also, you know, perceptions around their own potential use of cannabis, right? And I mean, a lot of people that we talk to who have kind of changed their opinion on cannabis, by and large, what you hear is, I had a friend or I had a family member experience X. They then obtained cannabis, you know, from a certain source, and this was the outcome, and it really opened my, you know, my eyes to the possibility. So I think gauging a little bit more kind of what their personal experience has been professionally with cannabis, you know, not whether they've considered recommending or not, but have patients come in and ask them, you know, have patients talk to them about wanting to use cannabis, and what do they do in those instances?
Yeah.
You know, if a patient has, you know, they have a patient who's in their care who is willing to admit to the doctor that they consume cannabis or they've consumed cannabis, how does that impact the care that they provide? You know, because I know there are some providers that will become aware of that and not want to treat you anymore, right? I know there are certain, you know, there's certain pain clinics, right, especially that will engage in behavior like that. So just trying to get deeper at the perceptions, but overall, I generally like the design of this survey better than the one we'll talk about here shortly, because it tries to drive much more subjective feedback. And my only other piece of advice, or I guess feedback, would be allowing open-ended questions as much as possible. Obviously, I know you have character limitations and things like that, but while I think there is value in asking someone to rate something on a scale, or to pick 3, or to multiple choice or whatever, true or false, I think there's value in those types of questions. Open-ended questions, I think, is generally where you get better feedback. But overall, I think this is good, and I think it also shows too a willingness on the part of the you know, DHHS to really delve into why someone maybe hasn't participated in the program as a provider, and help to clear up anything with them, while at the same time not taking a position, because I know you all like to remain neutral. So yeah, overall, I think it's a good first stab at it.
Great.
Rich?
Yeah.
Who is this going to? And there's no scope of, like, it doesn't say, like, is it just all licensed medical providers in Utah?
It'll be those providers that are eligible to participate in the program.
Okay.
So it won't go to dentists. It'll go to the MDs, the DOs, the APRNs, the PAs.
Will you be including anyone with a controlled license, or controlled substance license, now that everyone with that can?
Yeah.
Starting in May?
Yeah, they'll have an MD who has a controlled substance license,
Okay.
a DO that has a controlled substance license, right? Yeah, those will all be recommending medical providers. They're all able to recommend up to the limit.
So, and I just can't remember from the bill. The bill obviously did away with like the registration requirements, but it still says you have to be of a certain specialty.
Correct,
to
right.
recommend. So that's who it'll be sent to. You'll send it to everyone, and then you guys will use that first question to essentially weed out who is
License
already
category.
who's already an RMP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
Yeah, and there's about 38,000, I think, on that list.
Awesome.
And then the other thing in there, I think, would be maybe if someone would like it, if they don't have any information on cannabis, they don't have any opinion, they don't know anything, and their answer is going to be, I mean, may not add too much value, but maybe give an opportunity to say, would you like to learn more? Or do anything, so you can get their information for future educational moments.
Okay,
And then I think
we can consider that.
Going along with that, it's not necessarily for the survey, but does DHHS have a plan to notify providers of, I mean, the significant sea change that's you know, come into effect? Okay, just wanting to make sure, because, you know, it is a significant change to the, you know, to the program, you know, not having to register as a QNP anymore. And I imagine you're going to probably find in your responses that that's been a significant barrier to entry for, you know, for providers. So.
Right, yeah, so completely separate from the survey will be, this survey is going to help us learn how to reach out to them in the right way. But it's part of us learning, okay, these might be some good messages to share.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll reach out to them for sure, with purposes of informing them about the changes of the program, how there's not a registration fee, for example, and yeah.
I think one thing I was looking at too with the accessibility is ask about private insurance. You know, I mean, I know general practitioners, you know, would accept, you know, obviously accept insurance, but not all cannabis, you know, those recommending cannabis, you know, can or will. So I think in addition to, if we're going to talk about Medicaid and Medicare, we should probably talk about private insurance as well.
Uh-huh. Okay,
Rich, I did have a couple of recommendations or additions to these sections. If you don't mind, I just make note of those.
Yeah.
On section 2, the perceptions medical cannabis, the the in the example where it as to what degree or disagree do you with to what extent do you agree or disagree with the following statement? The safety of medical cannabis depends on the specific condition, patient profile, and dosage use. I think we should add administration route on that too, particularly with those that have respiratory issues. We wouldn't want them using any vape products, or anybody with topical uh, or skin conditions might want to avoid the topical preparations. But that would probably be one addition to that if we were to consider that as an example, is the administrative route
Yeah.
or form of medical cannabis that's being used or recommended. And in
Okay.
section number 3, barriers to participation, this is one that almost prevented myself from participating, is the availability or to locate proper malpractice insurance coverage, a policy that would cover me as a medical cannabis provider at an affordable rate. And in section number 4, this might be a big one, and maybe a difficult one but it might be something that may be considered, is looking at legislation that those who are admitted, those insurance or malpractice insurers who are admitted to Utah to sell their products, uh, have some type of mandated coverage for in their policies to cover medical cannabis providers. If they're going to practice in the state of Utah, they need to cover providers in their policies to some degree or extent, because that was the difficulty I found, is finding a policy that with a provider that would provide that coverage. You know, I did have to switch malpractice insurance coverage because the Berkshire Hathaway policy that I had told me that I could not participate if I was to stay on their policy.
Mhm.
So other than that, I didn't have anything else as I reviewed this to recommend as additions to these examples. But it is a good. I do like the uh, uh, like JD. I do like the concept of this and where this is going.
Great.
I think one other thing too is with the perceptions, I think we should be trying to determine both positive and negative perceptions around cannabis, to the extent the questions can kind of be fair and balanced to try to elicit, that information, because I think it's very easy to put a survey out that either makes someone look entirely pro cannabis or entirely anti-cannabis, and it would be fair and balanced, because we know that perceptions are absolutely going to slay on the issue.
Any other questions or comments for Rich? Thank you, Rich.
Yeah, and again, you can email MCPAB@utah.gov, the public as well, if you're wanting to share thoughts, suggestions for questions. Just if you do that by April 1st, then we can review those, consider those, and then make some decisions about the wording and language and everything that we do. Thank you.
I think we have some agency, Utah.
You see Lorene on there?
Matt, just so you know, Nara does have his hand up, I assume, for the medical provider survey item, in case you'd like to take a look on that, or do it there. Mindy, did you want to speak on this item, or?
I would like to say one thing, but I don't know if I can really tell you over the phone.
Yeah. Have you unmute? Read.
Are you ready for me?
We are.
Okay, sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you guys. Okay, so I will share. This is specifically about the market analysis survey from UDAF. Okay, are you seeing what I'm seeing?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little bit of a background on this market analysis survey and then a general overview of what we're going to include, including the participants that we're targeting and the topics that we're going to cover. Keep in mind throughout this whole thing that what we would like to get regarding feedback is not specific verbiage regarding questions, but rather like which questions you'd like to see if we have them covered already, and then also general concepts that need to be included. So with that being said, let me just jump in. If it will give me, okay, so I'll give you a little background, talk about the participants, the topics, the actual surveys, and how we're splitting it, and then that we're seeking feedback. So a little bit of background. So we're working with UDEF and DHHS on this. They are mandated to conduct an annual market analysis survey. We decided to make it a little bit more robust than what they have done last year. The goal specifically is to assess the level of and the barriers of the level of, and if there are any barriers and facilitators, specifically to the availability of medical cannabis, the variety of available products, and the quality of products. And I think it's all related to the number of licenses that are being given out. So here at the University of Utah, we have a little program within PARCA called MCOR that does medical cannabis research, and we have been asked to help in the development of this survey to help distribute it, analyze it, and then of course report on it. The participants we're targeting is basically two groups. It's basically people that have cards and people without cards, but we've split it up into 4 groups. So after determining if the participants are 18 or older, we are going to distribute it to, we're going to ask them, do you have a medical cannabis card and is it active? Do you have a medical cannabis card and it's expired as a separate survey? Do you not have a medical cannabis card, but you do use medical cannabis? Or do you not have a medical cannabis card and you do not use medical cannabis? So we have specific surveys designed for each of these participant groups. Survey A and B are going to be pretty similar in design because they're both targeted for people who have experience with the medical cannabis program. And so we're going to ask questions regarding these topics. One is regarding their cannabis card certification and registration. The other is regarding the medical cannabis pharmacies. Oh, so some of the examples will be like, how are you registered in the cannabis program? Which of these conditions do you have, etc. And please, when you hear these topics, think about maybe specific concepts that you would want to ask about. So yeah, also about the cannabis pharmacy. So where do you buy from? How long does it take you to get there, etc. Then we're going to ask about the specific products. For example, the quality of the products, do you change the products, etc. And then we're going to ask specific questions about cannabis use. How often do you use? And we thought perhaps that we might delve into a little bit of asking about overuse or substance abuse. So that would be for surveys A and B, those people who have active or just that have experience in the cannabis program. For Survey C, people who do not have cards, but they do use cannabis for medical purposes here in Utah, we're going to ask about cannabis use, so like what condition they have, and then we want to know where are you getting it from, and then why are you not in the cannabis program? So a slew of questions regarding that. And then for D, people who do not have medical cannabis cards and don't use cannabis. We want to know if they have any sort of relevant condition, even though we'll specifically be targeting people who do have qualifying conditions. We still want to ask that. And then, are you aware of the program? And questions about why they have chosen not to participate in the medical cannabis program. So those are kind of the general topics of each survey. Of course, for each survey, we'll have a demographic section that will be the same for every single one. And that will include things like age, zip code, their gender, race, ethnicity, education, and employment status. So that is, in short, the concept of the survey. And yeah, love to get some feedback on what you think would be useful, what you'd like to see covered, any specific questions. Yeah, that's all I've got.
Thank you for your presentation. I'll open it up to the board for any questions. One question I do have, so these example questions, I mean, are you expecting to expand on these, or is this all that's going to be asked? Or are you looking for more questions, you know?
So we have kind of set surveys. I personally didn't think it would be very productive if we just gave everybody the full survey. I wanted to get concepts back on what you think needed to be asked. And I think that's what the other people I'm working with also wanted. So there are more questions, yes, in detail. I would love to see what comes up as important without me presenting the whole thing, to see if we have covered what people think is important, because I don't want to just present it to you and then you're like, yeah, that works, or maybe not. So if there are specific concepts that you're thinking within those topics that would work, we also need to keep in mind time limits. So we don't want this to be too long because we want more people to answer it. So we're thinking, 25 to 30 questions max. But yeah, if you have specific topics that you think are important, like please pop them up.
I think one piece of feedback that I would have generally is similar to what I talked about with the last survey. Getting at more subjective data and responses, I think, is better. And there are already a number of data points that are collected by DHHS that answer some of the questions being asked, right? Like, how are you registered with the program? That can already be verified. What condition, do you qualify for? That kind of stuff can be answered. What products are you purchasing? Any of that stuff that can already be verified by data that DHHS and or UDAF can provide. I wouldn't necessarily waste your time with those questions. I would be driving at some more of the substantive, opinion questions as to, perceptions of the program. I might also consider, adding some policy related questions in, how they think the medical cannabis program might be improved. You know what I mean? Things of that nature. I would also just keep in mind, and I'm sure you guys are thinking about this, any questions related to the illicit use of cannabis, the data is going to be absolutely skewed and in some ways unreliable. Many people are not willing to be honest about their illicit use of cannabis. But I do think absolutely those questions are worth answering or asking and having answered, because we know from the last survey, there was a fair amount of people that were still purchasing outside of the market. I really do appreciate that you guys are going to collect demographics on the survey as well. I think that was one of the things from last year's analysis that seemed to lack a little bit. It was hard to tell when they said 60% of respondents were purchasing their cannabis outside the medical program. I had no idea from those survey respondents who that 60%, was. How much was it made up of folks who are actually patients versus not? So I think that's a good way to improve. One thing I think I would consider too as a topic area is asking about patient interactions, not just with the products and the program itself, but what have their interactions been like with recommending medical providers? What have their, interactions been like with pharmacy medical providers and agents to understand kind of the level of service that's being provided? I think that would provide a more holistic kind of view of their perceptions of the program. Because if someone has a bad interaction with the QMP, or now I'll keep forgetting RMP, that may then skew their perception of the program generally, even if the rest of the service they're getting is appropriate. And then I think I would just consider some questions around determining what their level of support for the program or not is, as well as what the perceptions are around adult use cannabis. There was some polling that came out around the time of the election that showed 50% support for adult use cannabis. While obviously there's no pending ballot initiative and stuff, and I'm guessing by this past legislative session, there's not a ton of appetite at the legislature for an adult use program. Clearly, the public is saying that there is an appetite, and what informs that opinion? Why would they potentially favor an adult use program or not? But overall, I love that this also, while I've been critical of some of the things, I really do like that it looks to talk to the various different types of cannabis users or non-users. And I think it's going to seek a more well-rounded, type of feedback. Yeah, I think just overall seeking to find more subjective opinion perception, responses, as opposed to data that can otherwise just be, that's already being collected. No sense in recreating that wheel if you don't have to. Now, if there are questions that riff off of that and drive more at the perception, maybe you ask the general question, but then just go deeper than that. But overall, excited to see a more well-rounded kind of, survey of the program and patients.
One thing I was going to bring up is, JD didn't like the question, but actually talking about what the following condition use medical cannabis for, I think
secondary question, I like it.
I think it's what are they actually using it for?
Yes,
because we know 87%
right?
of all patients have it for chronic pain. So I think if we can ask them, maybe list your primary condition or what other conditions are you using to help, is cannabis helping in your life?
Yeah, no, for sure. I should have clarified that. It's the first question, or just a general question, what's your qualifying condition?
No,
but what are you using it for?
Yes, I think that way,
question.
that would lead into more maybe topics for the Center for Medical Cannabis Research to dig into. Especially based off that, then you can say, hey, here's a survey of 90,000 patients in Utah, over 50% participated, and we actually know what these people are primarily using it for, and it's not on our list. Let's dig into it.
I agree with JD as far as the changes in the program, hearing from patients. I think that'd be really beneficial because I've heard from a bunch in the past couple of weeks, but also where they're getting their education from about cannabis and how they're treating.
Yeah.
I'd like to know that.
Great.
Please.
Brandon?
Those questions about what patients are actually trying to buy, those are actually even useful from patients, because one of the most common complaints that we get is that pharmacies don't have the product that they're actually looking for when they go to buy it. So that information in the survey is actually.
Oh yeah, no, I think like when you're purchasing in other markets, right? Or if there's programs, products that are not available. So what I'm just saying is it's like, hey, what's, in the last 2 months, what products have you purchased? Like those types of questions that we have other verifiable data for. But I think there's always going to be sub questions underneath those that will get at perceptions and we'll start to understand behaviors. So like for me, it's just anything we already have objective data for, don't need to ask the question, but anything that kind of riffs off of that and tries to say like, well, what condition are you actually treating it with? Hey, what products do you usually, purchase or use that you can't find in Utah? Those kinds of questions I think absolutely still have value. I'm just saying no sense in doing work that's already being done by it.
On here, their presentation, there's an email to send feedback. Do you know how soon you would like to get feedback as far as a survey or other questions we'd like to see?
Can I jump in and say? This is
Yeah, I
Jerry
think it's kind of a
Cochran.
question for Jerry or
Yeah,
Rich, really.
Rich, yeah. I'll say we'd love it as soon as possible. We've realized as we've created this. I'm Jerry Cochran. I'm a professor of medicine at University of Utah. I'm the leader of the NCORE program. And Laurita works with me in there. So we realized the survey is actually pretty complex as we've been developing it. It's so sooner the better, so we can work on refining the questions. And one thing I'll throw out there, and to keep in mind as people give feedback. And P.S. The feedback that's been given has just been outstanding. Thank you very much. It's been super helpful. Is that there's a bit of a regulatory barrier between the knowledge that we have about patients. Like we will receive contact information from the state for the participants in the program, but we will not be linking back, responses, individual responses. These will be not taken like we're going to find out their name and all those things and then link it back to the state and then link it back to their medical use. It just in terms of regulatory barriers, that would be very difficult. So it will probably, while it won't be completely anonymous, because we'll collect certain identifiers, we will only have essentially the information that we collect from the participants in the program in the survey itself. So we will know more about the non-medical cannabis using patients in terms of some potentially some health history. But the idea also is not, we could link that back, but the idea is to not link it back per se. So anyways, there's just a little bit of a barrier there.
And Jerry, you say as soon as possible to provide feedback. And I think we could, if there's feedback specific to the patient survey, that could be sent to MCPAB at utah.gov as well, not just the medical provider feedback, but we can have that sent to our team and then we can forward that on. But is there I know you say as soon as possible, is there a day specific that you can identify by which?
Sure. How about just in the next 2 weeks would be great.
Okay.
I imagine we'll start, if things go well on kind of the back end in terms of setting up the contracts and things like that for us to do the work. We would, and if that happened fairly soon, we could probably begin the IRB application at the University of Utah within a couple of weeks, for which we would need to have completed surveys.
Yep, great. Okay. So April 1st.
Before we move on, I just want to thank Jerry and Laurita and Brittany. These were great presentations, and it's clear you guys have put a lot of work and thought into the surveys that you've created. So thank you for doing this. It's going to help.
That's really nice. Thank you for saying that, Misty. These survey, it's been a lot of fun, but they have been complex, that's for sure.
Welcome to cannabis, my friends.
So glad to be here.
Great. So Jerry, April 1st at 5, we'll make sure we get all the input regarding the patient survey as well by then, and then we'll pass it on to Laurita.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And was there some public comment as well? Matt,
in the room, Mindy,
Yeah,
we'll open it up to the room. We're moving. We're still 5 minutes ahead of schedule. I can keep this schedule as tight as possible.
So I have 2 different public comments. Should do them both now?
Are they both related to the medical cannabis market analysis?
No, one's related to something different. So can we, okay. I already signed here. Okay, so I just wanted, this comment is for Brittany, who's doing the provider survey. I wanted to balance what Christopher Morgan said about malpractice insurance. It is true that if your primary focus is, if you're a QMP and you're advertising for cannabis patients, yes, you will have malpractice insurance. I worry that if we put this in a survey, you'll only scare providers away. I talked to Dr. Ray Ward, who is a family care provider in Bountiful, and he gives medical cannabis cards without charging patients any additional fees, and he has no changes in his malpractice insurance. So I just think there's some misinformation about regular doctors needing to have expensive malpractice insurance, and this is not true. And I would love it if we could just not design our survey to scare away people who, you could have it somewhere so you could know if that's the reason they don't want to recommend. But then I think that there should be some information from the state letting all providers know that this is not required if it's not your primary business.
Yeah, I mean, that was raised as a reason.
Yeah.
To oppose HB 357.
Yeah, and I think it's used as a scare tactic
Kicked off of their
to,
their insurance or
Yeah.
or couldn't obtain.
Yeah.
Insurance. And look, I think it's like insurance in any realm. The more risky behavior you engage in, which regardless of what we think of this, insurers are going to see this as risky behavior. Some will insure you and some won't.
and I also want to discourage providers from charging extra money to get a card. This should not be a pay to play program. You should never require a patient pay more money just to get a medical cannabis card. So that's my comment to Brittany. I have another comment that I can hope to address later about some legislation.
I just want to add, you guys, so when I went to renew my malpractice, there was a specific question on the renewal application whether or not we are doing medical cannabis or recommending that. And I answered in the affirmative, and I got a letter back from my insurance provider that if we do that, they will drop us from the policy. So I did have to switch insurance providers. So there are some out there that will not cover.
Yeah, but none of my
and are
LMP
specifically asked.
providers, none of my LMP providers have ever had to get malpractice insurance. I just think, like I said, I think we should talk to Dr. Ray Ward because he's the one who told me that he's never had to have that insurance because a very small percentage of his business is medical cannabis cards.
So
And that's ideally what I want to see.
Let me clarify that. The medical cannabis is not my primary line of business. I do endocrine and family medicine both. And so I carry malpractice for that purpose. The issue is the question on the renewal application is whether or not I engage in participating in any medical cannabis or program. And the answer was yes. So they did tell me that they would no longer cover me under my regular malpractice policy for my non-medical cannabis activities. So that I did have to change.
Sure. And I'm not an expert. I think it just deserves some research from the regulation department.
Agreed, but it is a concern for other providers. I'm not the only one that's had issues with this and had to go out searching for another provider. I mean, if I was just doing medical cannabis and that was it, then fine. I would just rely on the state statutes as they stand. But I do engage in other medical practice other than medical cannabis, and I do have to have coverage.
And I think if I can just respond really fast, I appreciate, the concerns on both sides and we can definitely take it into consideration in the way it's asked, but it sounds like it might be an important thing to understand a little bit deeper. Is this a problem that is potentially preventing physicians or providers from participating in the program that we can then, try to address with more awareness and information to providers? So I do still think there's value in understanding if that is a big reason.
Well, I think part of it too is just again the value of an open-ended question as opposed to one where they choose from things. So you're not putting anything in their head and they can just give you the response. But insurance is a problem. If you're in the industry, you already know. We're comp almost every year. We've had to find a new provider because they eventually tell you, oh, we just decided this year we're not going to work with cannabis business anymore, right? People get their bank accounts shut down all the time. Now, luckily in the state of Utah, there's a good bank here that will bank with cannabis businesses, but insurance is always a tricky situation. And it's why cannabis specific insurance lines have been developed. And I'm sure that if we surveyed the operators in Utah, we're all probably insuring through most of the same insurance lines. But I think a point that Mindy made that's really important is just trying to keep the surveys as unbiased as we can and not, direct someone in the direction of an answer or another. I know that's hard to do, but again, I think it's why I like open-ended questions as opposed to multiple choice and stuff like that, because I think those always kind of suggest an answer potentially. There's ways to do it, but I just think something to keep in mind. But I agree, if it's something we're debating here, we just had a good debate about it, probably a relevant question to ask, providers about, because it sounds like for some, and I've heard, not just some, I've heard this from people that this is a reason not to recommend. This. So, but I think Mindy's point is well taken, that the survey shouldn't be designed in such a way to convince people who are not already RMPs to not ever become one. You know what I mean? So I think that's a really, really valid point.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Megan just had his
All
hand
right,
up.
we will go ahead and move on. Appreciate the time and presentations, and as a board, if there's any feedback or questions or any questions you'd like to ask in these surveys, let's send that over to just MCPAB, Utah.gov, and Rich and Trevor will forward it on to the responsible parties. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to this next topic, which is the legislative update and bill outcomes. Hopefully all of you guys are as excited as I was for the last day of the session with all the laws that were passed and changed. So we'll kind of go through. I'm not going to really dig deep. I know it does say we have 45 minutes. I don't think this will take too much longer than probably 15. I know we spent a lot of the last couple of meetings talking about some of these bills. So there were a total of 4 of the 5 proposed bills. It does say HB 203 did not pass. 97% of the language from HB 203 was moved into HB 54 on the last day, and so it did pass. I mean, it did technically. Is so. I mean, we got a good French over here. So it was, if you watch the session, it's interesting to see the politics in play and how they got those things moved in and moved out and all voted on. So the governor's has, I think some of these have been moved on to signature. I got some emails. I haven't seen anything has been signed yet. But it's, yeah, sent for enroll. A couple of them, I think 64 has been sent to the governor. For signature.
They're all awaiting the governor's signature.
Yeah, waiting signature. Yeah. So, he usually signs a big block of them every day, big PR spectacle. So if you'd like to watch it, you can.
I think the only one that I wanted to just make special mention, because we didn't cover it too much, and I appreciate you including it. I was looking for it after I heard about it, was the change in the fees.
Yeah.
Right, to know that the state, the $3 state fee is going to be reduced to $1.50. Knowing that the patient card fee is going to be reduced, caregiver cards, every cost is going to be reduced, in some form or fashion for folks. And while, maybe not a significant policy change for the program, that is real money, going back to patients. I would still like to see us get rid of the background check requirements for caregivers, or at least reduce the cost of that substantially. It's interesting, we don't put a patient through a background check, but we put a caregiver. And I understand some of the policy reasons for maybe wanting to do that. But I think that can be a prohibitive reason. And what we end up seeing, and this is unfortunate, is you'll see a lot of people show up, with their loved ones' cannabis card, with form of payment ready to pick it up, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry, you're not a caregiver, so you can't get this. And usually you're met with, man, can you just do it? This is really expensive to become a caregiver, all that stuff. So I'd really like to see that part, be removed, or as Des presented, I think in a prior meeting, some sort of just, attestation under the penalty of perjury, around your criminal background, history and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and again, I think, that's some good changes for the industry, right? To see those fees go down. A lot of people complain about the cost of a card. I mean, I understand the majority of that's from the recommending medical provider, and anywhere the state can help patients. Seeing a 50% reduction in most cases is a huge win for the patients. Transaction fee is a large amount now. I know, again, one of the things that's talked about regularly as a producer are licensing fees, and we talked about the size of the budget that's within the Department for Medical Cannabis. How does this change affect your guys' forecasting, Rich? I mean, are we gonna continue to have? I mean, obviously that budget's not gonna be cut in half.
And do all
Yeah.
those fees go into the like the ones that were all reduced, do they all go into the qualified patient
Mhm.
enterprise fund? And then remind me exactly what the enterprise fund is used for. Is that essentially your budget for DHHS for?
It is,
regulation?
yeah, but there's a lot of funds from that qualified patient enterprise fund that are used to cover software costs. To make it so patients can get their cards so quickly, right? So also personnel costs, then there's a lot of other expenses beyond those, but those are the two big expenses that we use it to cover.
It also issued a grant for research.
Yeah, so the funding that we give to the Center for Medical Cannabis Research at the University of Utah comes from that fund as well.
Then I assume the qualified production enterprise fund makes up UDAF's budget for administering the program. I just want to make sure I understood all that correctly.
Well, we started backwards, so SB 8, yes. Good bill. Go with it, so 357, it was mentioned slightly that, again, that change, just a quick overview. Most of these bills are effective, either May 7th or July 1st. This is a July 1st bill. It does essentially combine QMP and LMP into one. It's now just a recommending medical provider. So for those of us within in the industry for the last 5 years, they have difficulty removing the word QMP from our dictionary. And let's see. So, if you have any questions on that, feel free to ask.
One thing that is a bit unique about 357 is that it becomes effective July 1.
Yeah.
And the other bills become effective May 7.
Yeah. See, so let's. The only thing other on here that was new that affected kind of the industry is that the additional warning that will be added to all products that discusses cannabis for pregnant and breastfeeding women. So I know as a company, we're in the middle of just getting it already added to our packaging. There's no reason to wait January 1st. So we order, we'll get it done. It's a good thing to add. So we're going to get that added in there as soon as we can. So, let's see. So SB 64, so Senator Vickers' bill will take effect on May 7th. So this one, I think the only kind of patient, like I had Trevor kind of put this together briefly, but for patients, it allows them to bring their own bag now into the pharmacy. So must be opaque. It can't be a Walmart grocery bag. I'm sure one of those, unless it's black, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what color those are.
For UDAF, will you all start allowing us to sell carrying cases now? You know, essentially
Tote
reusable
bags.
carrying cases and stuff, because I know when we had the kind of, I remember it was, oh, you can't, I know you guys eventually changed your position, but it was essentially like anything other than a device couldn't be sold anymore, and I know that we kind of had to, parse some of that out. If now we're gonna be, patients are gonna be allowed to bring to and from, would we be allowed to sell, not necessarily just like exit bags, but carrying cases that they can bring in? It essentially is a bag or a box, type of thing. Will we be allowed to sell those to patients?
We might have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
Yeah. But until then, you can bring your own bags in. Everyone has those disposable bags. Let's see. So as far as providers for this one, this is just who can access EDS, the Department of Health, and it's more HIPAA education that they have to go through. And this is one thing I know we're going to be talking through as a board later on. Is the one thing is the handouts that patients into the product insert. So the Department of Health will be creating these inserts for all product types. And so I think obviously once this goes into effect by May 7th, we have 180 days to get that done. So we'll be hearing in probably several board meetings, just the rule change as well as what type of information we want. I know in a conversation that has happened, we have several categories and subcategories of products. It will be very difficult for the department to do a product insert for every single product that's made by a company. I think right now we have 73 different brands that are out there that
I
make
think it would make
that make
sense to
different
do
products?
like on a form factor
Yeah.
basis and, but also I understand too, there may be, you know, if you have ratio products too, that may require, you know, something different.
Yeah.
But I would think sticking to a more kind of
Generic.
this is a capsule, right? This is a tincture,
Here's
this
a
is
gummy.
the main form factors. And then honestly, I think with, you know, I guess I wanted to ask you guys this too, now that apparently the thing I didn't think used to need clarity, got clarity around websites for processors. As long as that is age gated, it becomes a form of targeted marketing, or it's just allowed by basic advertising.
Yeah, so we.
Or did we just muddy the waters?
This might be my public,
I won't hold you to it.
my public thank you to Rich and them, because I got yelled at pretty hard during the session for allowing, the websites as targeted marketing, and they didn't really care when I said, well, that's how it was health, but, they're probably sick of it.
Yeah, that's how it's always
They're
been.
probably sick of it, use that as my excuse, so, I think it's fairly, based on the change to the statute and obviously the stance that you brought up a couple times during these meetings and stuff about, you know, being target marketing and our stance for processors is, didn't really call out, that they felt like they needed to call them out. That's kind of, hate to say, told you so, but.
Yeah. So it's really gonna be, obviously, the content's gonna be different than what you find on a pharmacy website, but so long as it's age gated. And they don't have the additional requirement to kind of check a box to receive information regarding like discounts and incentives.
It's gonna be
and stuff.
similar to like that, like, when I say this, you know, there's the portion of the statute that talks about advertising and says, here's the things you can advertise.
Yes.
Right, and so it's gonna be like that, because it calls out the handful of things that can be on that, obviously that'll be age gated, and then it can say, you know, how, what their products are, and where you know. You only should need just one or two of them.
Gotcha.
It's not like it looks like there's anything that we need to go into, it was on,
Yeah.
it was just pretty basic and stuff, really good, so. Okay.
Fun stuff.
Joey?
So SB 64 towards this is the last change they made, I think it was like the last day or two before it was voted on, but they did add in their modified what it is for a processing license. And then a tier 1 can have a second facility at a reduced licensing cost of 70,000, as long as it's tied into the cultivation facility. So it does kind of reduce, and really the benefit of that is because there is the cap of up to 18 processor licenses, and we're currently at 18, 2 of which are still in the process, so they've been approved, they're just process their build outs. So obviously that was capped it. This frees up 2 licenses that are currently for companies, if they choose to do this, they can get a reduced fee because they're currently paying for 2 licenses. So.
Yeah, and I also think too, it creates, you know, for instance, we are an operator that could benefit from this, right? With 2 cultivation locations, so instead of now having to take everything from our outdoor facility now to our indoor facility for purposes of processing, it can potentially be done, but even there, so it creates greater efficiencies and just it's a way to reduce costs. So we appreciate the department was really quick to respond on this. The lawmakers were good to work with, and so overall, I think it was an important change, albeit, you know, one that came, you know, towards the end.
Yeah, I'd actually throw this one out as an example of industry lawmakers and regulators working together fairly quickly. You know, I talked to JD and Alex about my concerns about it and stuff, and it looked like that. My concerns got answered fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that portion.
No, it's a good change. So, let's see. So going in, there were one of the concerns within the industry was the way violations, how they can be, they were cited to the production establishments. This just has given them a 30 days for remedy to fix violations. Otherwise, if it's not corrected, it does continue down that path. And then let's see what else. The pharmacy, this again will be a QR code for the product or check anything that talks more about product inserts. Let's see, anything else we got there? I think. Oh, and then the last thing, big change from SB 64 was the hard drives. One of the things that came up was there was some concern that you're seeing, I mean, there are people holding tent fairs in front of their pharmacy to drive patient growth. And there's some testimony, some of it about kids being there. I mean, really, all this does is now this limits them to be more than 500 feet away from the pharmacy's property line. So it moves the tent down the road. But really the goal of this is they want doctors who are doing it. And hopefully the changes we're seeing with the RMPs, if we can get fees reduced, we can get those things, more and more doctors are getting on board of prescribing. I think going back to the topic on the doctor survey, hopefully we can get some quality information back to provide some educational material going forward and get the change in the right direction. All right, the other bill that passed, let's see. I gotta skip the page. I didn't. Which wasn't on here, was HB 343. We talked about it last time. Nothing changed on that one from necessarily from when it was voted on to moved in. It was pretty quick. The last one was HB 54. Initially, that was labeled as the hemp amendments. That one did make some regulatory changes as far as the hemp industry and the products that have made substantial changes on the medical cannabis program. For patients, one of the big things that's on there is all pharmacies will be required to have a picture of the product's fact panel on their website. So that our patients understand when they're buying a product, they're actually going to get the product that's on there. Hopefully, that's in there. And that does have to take it first on, that goes into effect July 1st. So for all pharmacies. Let's see. It does, we kind of already talked about this a little bit already, but again, the targeted marketing with processors allow the website what that means. It did allow for cannabis cultivator to use radiation-based methods for the quality assurance and remediation purposes of their flower. I'm sure we'll be getting rules from Cody on that here shortly. On the radiated cannabis.
Yes.
So
we were actually discussing that.
yeah. Let's see. Testing. I mean, I guess you can't require us to continue to test stuff. Really all
Very technical answer.
Once APRC tested, UDOT tested, the testing is done.
Oh, yeah.
So, hey, what bill did you say the picture of the fact panel?
It's in 54, yeah. The other, and we kind of go back to the production establishments. One of the hard things we have is when it came to disputes, the process we had before was some of it for the dispute, there was a warning. If it was higher up and while you tried to fight it, again, it was the regulators who you're meeting with to try and fight it, to issue the citation. This did put an administrative law judge for appeals to kind of mediate the process. So if we do go that route, there's someone who hopefully maybe has some understanding of the medical cannabis program, but maybe not necessarily involved in be a third ear to listen to both sides. Licensing fees. So this is where they did introduce 2 additional pharmacy licenses. So the initial count when it was first proposed for 25, it got whittled down to 2. And they're both in medically underserved areas of a class 3, 4, 5, or 6 county. So it does put access more to a rural area. And it does reduce that licensing fee to 50% of the normal cost. So there's a slight savings in that one. We will be seeing that one first pharmacy issued by the end of this year. And then the second pharmacy under statute has to be issued next year by the end of next year. Let's see. And then I think that's, and then we will be losing, it is in paper, we are losing Misty as the research professional, but she'll be hopefully be put right back in as the representative appointed by the Research Center for Medical Cannabis Research. So, we knew that was happening, Misty. So
fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Hey, I think Valerie already said she was doing it. Like, at least that was in the meeting minutes. So, let's see, the last thing in, I guess it was in here, 343, that's just a small one. That's just the odor.
Small for you, bigger for some.
So those facilities located in an industrial location are now required as part of the operating plan. to have an odor mitigation. What that looks like is yet to be determined as, we'll wait on our friends at Olson to do that study. Thank you, JD. And Cody.
Well, yeah, I just actually, I was gonna give a bit of an update on that.
Oh, perfect.
Obviously, 343's got a fairly short turnaround for this, report to go back. It's supposed to be done by before January 1st of 2026. And so we've already started kind of making some plans. We're gathering information to be able to contact the municipalities or the counties where these licensees are situated. So we'll kind of start that one. We're starting to work on a request for to be able to purchase some stuff. We actually have to put it out for bid to a certain extent because with the government. So we'll have to kind of try to get that done as quick as we can. But our hope is that we should be able to have something kind of set, and then we'll be contacting the licensees just to let them know kind of what our plans are, talk to them about how that's going to work, and maybe get some schedules set so they can come out and do some things. And obviously, there's some changes to operating plan aspects to that as well, such as what equipment's being used, what the processes are, and things like that are causing odor and things like that. So there is going to be some things as this goes into effect and the odors, and renewals come up in the odor aspect might come into play.
So because the bill takes effect May 7th, will you be reaching out to all the licenses and have them go through a change request and have this operating plan?
We'll probably do it as you
Or
guys.
just as renewals. Okay. That was gonna be my suggestion, was because then you can work through and maybe get a
I
standard.
mean, there's those that are probably like in this time we're gonna miss, like, between January and June. That we probably ought to work on time frame and maybe give them to December to do or something, but we'll take a look at that, just to make sure everybody's up and speed when we go to report in December or January. We're just trying to get the initial portions figured out as quick as we can, so we can get working on it before, because it is a short turnaround. The other thing that might be of importance to some licensees, especially on the pharmacy side in HB 54, was that it changed the amount of closed door pharmacies to be opened to just one by 2027. So instead of the 3, so I know that's maybe of some importance to some of the pharmacy licensees out there too. So.
All right, any other questions from the board or anything? Yeah, that is the legislative update. So I want to thank Trevor for putting this summary together. It was a lot of changes that, as before we met, we didn't know what was going to be on there because it was bills were removed, not removed, voted on, not voted on, table, circle. So it's good to have, I'm sure for certain people to have the session over and relax and take a couple days off. If there's not anything else, we will go ahead and go right into our work session. So the point of the work session is now we have the next 7 months, 8 months to get some input and feedback to the legislators for program changes or anything we'd like to see for the next legislative session. So kind of what I want to focus on, I mean, at least for the next several months, is just get a list of agenda items, topics that any of you are passionate about, what we want to see. I know I've talked to several of you in the past, and you've had thoughts and ideas that you'd like to see that, as our board, we just haven't gotten to. I want to make sure that as we have time that we're able to get through these sessions and work through kind of these meetings in a productive fashion. So with that, this is really whatever direction we want to go in. We can get started. So. I know one thing I've talked through with Trevor is the agenda items. Or do we able to throw that up?
The item tracker?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just 1 second.
So, and then he did, I believe he sent that out to hopefully all of you, the chance to look at it. There's a couple items left on our tracker.
This might be a little difficult to see.
I believe in you.
Yeah.
So.
If I zoom out here a little
Easy to
bit,
see.
hopefully. You have a couple more down here. But we can start, I suppose, at the top.
Is that where we left off?
Yes.
At the top one, well, we can discuss it. I think it's been discussed. Yeah.
Right,
So,
in speaking to that, the idea of qualifying conditions, I know I asked Trevor yesterday, I couldn't remember what the board's recommendation was, but it was at that time to work with the CRRB.
Yeah.
To identify individual conditions. I would really like to work with the Center for Medical Cannabis Research, and I think the ask will be for me, just to, short of us, recommending that they do further research. I would love to know, from Misty's point of view, of the conditions that people are using cannabis for, and I'm sure the patient survey is going to help us with some of this stuff. To identify what what the research is and what the scientific evidence is for those conditions. Because when we as a company, this has been a couple of years ago now, did a survey of patients, right, asking them what conditions you use medical cannabis for, we didn't include just qualifying conditions and outside of pain, which was obviously the number one because that's what most people qualify for. The responses around sleep disturbance, the responses around mental health conditions like anxiety and depression were way up on the list, you know what I mean, and way outnumbered a bunch of other qualifying conditions. So I'd love to see us find a way to collaborate with the center to get information, if assuming it's out there, that would support adding individual conditions, because it seemed like that was the appetite of the board. And that may be the appetite, a better appetite for lawmakers. Look, you all know my personal position. I think you should be able to recommend it for any condition that you see fit within your professional judgment. That doesn't seem to have, caught on here in Utah quite yet. But we've not, other than acute pain, we have not added a qualifying condition since the program's inception. And we know people are using cannabis effectively for other conditions. So it'd be nice to just delve into that, and wherever it takes us. It takes us. So I don't know if that's something the center is planning to do research on individual kind of, potential qualifying conditions, or if nothing else, maybe we can get some sort of idea on what the research is that's out there to know if we have enough backing. Because I think once we go into individual conditions, we're probably going to face discussions more around not is this just a good policy idea, but is there evidence, that it helps for this condition? So any support we can find like that, and I think, finding a way to collaborate with the new Center for Research, even if it's just to help us compile, what the current research is on a given condition, I think would be helpful.
If I could expand on that, I think another potential utility there is also, it's not just qualifying conditions, but even routes of administration, better ways to optimize the program. And I think this is an area that would be very rich for maybe having a subcommittee where we have interested parties from both committees kind of serve as a think tank about how can we build a stronger bridge between the two. Because I think what I've seen is a lot of times the Center for Medical Cannabis is looking to the CRRB, and the CRRB is looking to the center for recommendations on what they should look at next. And perhaps if we could prioritize areas of research, it would be the most efficient use of time and resources.
Is there a sunset date on the CRRB?
Well, the CRRB,
July.
if I understand though that its functions are going to roll into the CMCR, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Right.
I think as a board for us, it's perfectly acceptable for us to make a recommendation on certain I mean, if we want to push them to study sleep and anxiety and depression. That
If nothing else,
way,
just aggregate what the current
Yes.
science is
Yeah.
and data and stuff too, because yeah, I think when you wade into the territory of individual conditions, it's gonna be far more about that than is it a good
Yeah.
policy idea to allow providers to recommend for any condition, right? That's, I think those are different.
Oh.
Similar discussions, but they're definitely gonna have some differences.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, legislators are more open to allowing additional conditions if it's coming from a scientific background and evidence-based. And I know we still have subjective. Stories all the time.
You put subjective and anecdotals, all you got. Sometimes you kind of got around,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
But I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I mean, I think what the next meeting, April 8th. So. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, I mean, I'm happy, I don't know, if now it's time to make a recommendation for it, we can do them at any time for them to make those. That type of, have an agenda item, at least maybe send over a letter saying we'd like to get this information. So.
Yeah, and one of the agenda items on that final Cannabis Research Review Board agenda on April 8th is the transition to the University of Utah. So Valerie will be speaking to that. She'll talk about what their plans are.
Okay.
And also, just by way of information, you may already know this, but the Cannabis Research Review Board did research some of the specific topics that you mentioned, sleep, anxiety, depression. They did do research on those. They had presentations on those topics, and that information is still on the public notice website. So board members are welcome to review what they came up with at that time.
I think I'm interested in your perspective. I'll just be frank. So hopefully the CR, the Center for Medical Research can take up some of these things as, as well. But I think that's been part of, that's what I'm looking forward to going forward is a better partnership where we're more aware of what they're doing, they're more aware of what we're doing, because and people that attend those meetings know, as the attendance to those meetings is, sparse sometimes, and folks don't always do it. So it'll be nice to get that information. And also I think to gain a different perspective within the new center, with their ability to not just review research, but also to do, potential research as well. So,
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. You want to invite her to say a few words?
Whom are you talking to?
Valerie. Hey Valerie, this is Matt. You can go ahead, make some comments.
Hi, guys. Yeah, I'm so glad that you brought this up. We are working, as Rich said, to kind of create that transition meeting, and we'll be presenting. But one of the things Misty and I have discussed over the course of the last few months, I want to say we kind of started the discussions almost 6 months ago, maybe even. We wanted to build out a research committee, and that committee would not only serve to now take on what we'll be doing with the CRRB, but we'd also like for it to serve as kind of a sounding board and discussion group that can help to add to this list of things that you guys might want to prioritize within the research scope, or difficulties or policies that could help support us advance research. So we wanted to kind of bring that board together. It has been open, and we do have some of the current CRB committee members committed to moving over to support that. But I would welcome any of you to also throw your hat in the ring if you would be interested in being a part of that. That overarching research committee would kind of navigate the conversations around indications. We'll be going back and looking at some of the indications and continuously doing updates as evidence becomes more aware, more available. But we'll also be obviously introducing new indications. To kick us off, I went through every state and looked at a comparison factor of what we have versus what is more common and kind of just prioritize some of the things that we see there is more research and support nationwide versus kind of those one-off and rare disease areas, so that we could kind of at least have a list that we can go off of. But I would love for us to, as you mentioned, kind of have support from not only the industry patients, but obviously you guys as well. So I would welcome any of you. Please reach out to me if you'd like to join the committee. We're still in the planning phases, but that would be wonderful. And under the research committee, we'll be building out expert focused groups, maybe four-ish researchers that we would invite specifically for any indication as we're looking at that, just so that we can really hone in on making sure that it is, as you guys said, evidence-based and kind of an easier discussion than, I feel like our CRB was tasked with a lot. And so we're hoping we can use this board as a dual option to kind of bridge that gap. That's all. But please reach out. Let me know if you'd like to join.
Thank you very much for that invitation, and we're excited to see where this can go this upcoming year. We'll make sure that we're providing hopefully some good recommendations on things that we would like to see as a policy advisory board to try and get some policy change within Utah. So.
Great, thank you.
All right. Let's see. So back on the list, I think some of the items that were on there were probably, it did list. I'm trying to remember. Let's see. The liaison situation involving medical cannabis. That was in the net thing. You're still trying to move with that. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, it was just more of an emergency card kind of a situation. Helping
Emergency
people,
caregiver
but yeah.
card.
Well, just
Yeah.
when people wanted access to an
Okay.
emergency card or under circumstances, but I think it's pretty accessible at this point.
Yeah. I don't know what program growth means. I think
All of these.
But UDAP, the Department of Health, you're in charge of that one. So
I think the conversations around that related to what we've been discussing the
Just
past
like
few months,
that.
which is, retention rate, seeing the renewal rate over time and how that number ebbs and flows, which is why we provided that data, I think. Back in January, we gave that presentation,
Okay.
but I believe it was sort of a catch-all behind, how many patients have left the program, how many stay, and probably related to that.
let's see. Minutes.
Was that one also, so we could come up with like the rubric in which we would, what patient growth, if that created.
Yeah, it was probably
opportunity
related to
for-
licensing, and that was in the bill until it wasn't, when they made the
Yeah.
changes around how many licenses there were or when.
It's gone now.
They're all
Right.
capped, so we request you.
Yeah, even so, like the scoring criteria for new pharmacy. I guess we can look at that one, but it
Yeah, we've been saying we need to look at that since the beginning of the
Doesn't
program,
really matter.
whether or not the law allows.
Yeah, at this point, we're capped at 17 pharmacies, and the
For life.
only two are can only go, from my estimation, in like 3 counties. So I don't know, if you do the medically underserved and third, fourth, fifth, or sixth class, we did the little analysis.
there's some good cities. I've looked
It's
at
pretty.
them. That's not
I'm just saying, and who those
Oh,
can be given to and what they'll have to consider. If they open up it again, we'll already have language that we can borrow from, because it was in one of JDP's version of 203 around considering patient growth and things like that. So I think that's probably more of what it was tied to. So if they ever decide to open licenses back up again and have any kind of non-independence or kind of rural focus.
You can just put on there that one additional medical camp. We can discuss, but here's the thing, it's a policy advisory board. We're more than happy we can write our own for or against additional pharmacies. I think before the session, it'd probably be good as a board if we do meet and say, hey, look, well, obviously this is waiting until we get the market analysis.
Yeah,
And I think at that point, for us discussing, so maybe just change it. We'll still leave it on there, but probably put it after.
We can always put just hold
Yeah,
on it.
yeah, but we'll wait till the market analysis is done, for us to make a recommendation of whether, based off of what UDAP feels and the Department of Health is, just be able to work with it as well. Let's see, so medical cannabis pharmacy discounts. That one was one of the things I was approached by some people is they're tired of looking for the best discount possible on the pharmacy. They shop around all day, every day, trying to find which pharmacy will have the best deal of a certain day. And they said, they just asked me, why do we have discounts? And I said, great question. I'll bring it to the board. I don't know if there's not going to be a right or wrong answer. There could be wrong ones, there could be right ones.
I
But
mean, to me, I think it's how you price.
But
it.
it's all
Either
about-
everyday low pricing or it's discounts.
discounts.
I mean, you
That's-
can choose which flavor of
Yes.
pricing you like.
So, but I mean, just for looking at sales data, I think this last month, there was almost $2 million in discounts applied to products for Utah patients. So it was roughly 15–16% of the overall sales. So it's a large amount. So which just tells you that people are shopping for discounts. So, and we know that's the case because every survey we've done, typically price has been the #1 indicator of why they shop or where they shop.
Well, I think also too, if we ever ask for additional data around, pricing and cost and everything, make sure we're factoring in discounts into that. Because if you look at the raw numbers, right, if you back discounts out, yeah, it seems skewed, but when you include discounts, price gets more.
It's very unlikely nowadays a patient does not get a discount.
Or at least it's not able
So not able to get a discount. Yes. So depending on which pharmacy they go to. And the pharmacy, I mean, patients are smart, but again, it takes a lot of time.
As a patient, it just feels like one more hoop you've got to jump through to do all this. And so I understand the frustration with this.
So, I mean, if something we want to address, we can. I don't have a policy for or against. I'm not a pharmacy. So I'm not for, I'm not against. I have family members with the patients, and so I'm for them saving money when they can. That's about patients access. So all right, let's see. Was that all of them?
That was it.
Okay. Let's see, is there anything else we want to add to this long agenda list? Because these will be our meetings. Yes.
I mean, we again asked, with the patients group, and we were like, what does everybody want? And over and over and over, it's, the same types of things. But our #1 is being able to combust and home grow. And I maybe when there's a slow moment, and I only say that not because the patient's voices don't matter, but because I don't know of one lawmaker that would actually vote for this, right? And so, but it is the #1 request of patients when they respond. And so, and looking at it, I think out of the 35 legal states, 29, I think, have some form of ability to grow a plant or 2 or up to 6 at home. And so if we have time this year, I think it's worth discussing and looking at
Vote on that.
what that looks like. And again, we can advise on it. I still don't know that any lawmaker would vote for it, but good education.
Cody would love to do some audits and some inspections.
Oh, Cody, home inspections.
Yeah, it depends on the neighborhood.
Letter of concern over there. Well, if you base it off of what Prop 2 was, you have to correct me, Des, if you know this. I think it was 100 or 125 miles away from a pharmacy. 150? So it's even worse.
And we have to be like complete transparency. When we put that in, we were giggling like school children. We knew it was coming out and it was stupid and we should have never put it in, but we did it because we're like, they're going to make us compromise certain things out. And so we were like, here's a low-hanging fruit, take this from us, right? And that really has come back to bite us. So not that I disagree that other states are doing it well. We just knew that the climate in Utah would never allow.
Well, it doesn't hurt to discuss. I mean, I've talked to some patients and other people around, and their appetite for home grow, it wouldn't even help them because they live by pharmacies. If that's how it's gonna be. And to your point, in other states, a lot of times it is based on the ruralness of their location that they can do home grow, or the type of condition that they have.
I mean, usually it's just around.
And when another just transparency was when we put it in, we were also looking at, I believe, Nevada, who had allowed a medical cannabis program, but then disallowed any dispensaries. And so they had no program. And so that's where like, hey, if Utah decided to just disallow anybody to build a pharmacy, then this would be the fallback point, right? So it was kind of a safety net to hold the program accountable. So those were our intentions when we did that. I don't disagree that, I mean, I have some friends in Arizona that they have a couple plants that they use now to treat some cancer, and they do a great job. So I don't think it's always recreational at all, but it's something that maybe we could look at.
Yeah. Oh yeah, decriminalization. Sure. I just saw their own pages for this stuff.
I can't hear you, JD.
He whispered.
Decriminalization.
Oh yeah, no, that's definitely something to look at.
The other top comment we got from, besides price and more pharmacies, was consistency and availability for products.
Yep.
So having a wide variety and having consistent access to it, and job protections.
Job
You
protection.
know,
We
concerns
can't-
about job protections.
Yeah, which we can talk about, but we can't really do anything about that.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Tell me
Many
more,
states-
JD.
Many states have provided protections for private employees. It
Oh.
is just a choice that gets made. It has been done in other states. I can show you a bunch. We can. It's
Okay.
just gonna be the appetite of whether to do it or not. But there are private employee protections that exist in the law.
You can give them for certain clauses and carve out certain things.
Yep.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's more difficult. Because there are private.
So sort of just, a lot of times it's just on this.
Yep.
So I've dealt with that. All right, anyone else have anything else? You had talked about product avail, oh, we got it on there.
Was combustion something you wanted to add this? Despite the massive asterisks.
Really, it's gonna be pre-roll is what it's gonna be, because we already have combustible flour. It's whether or not they can put flames to fire. So
Where they
that's-
can, yeah.
that's their method for using it, right?
I think if let's add it and then let's talk about it, because the two groups that we run into that are using combustibles are veterans, because that's their old school and that was the way they started and that's the way they want to continue. And I have talked to many extreme pain patients at this point, and it seems like the patients that are in extreme pain do end up combusting. Maybe we just look at advising a don't ask, don't tell in your own home policy. I don't know, but maybe let's look at it and see what other states have done.
I think it would be worth an argument letting people know the time difference as far as being able to combust it and vaping it, and what a session looks like, because you can combust something and it can take 5 minutes, but if you vape something, even with the best machine, you're gonna spend 20-25 minutes inhaling that. So
yeah,
the pain makes complete sense.
Yeah, so it's worth it. I think combustion is worth it for our patients.
It's on there.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, that's what this is for.
Okay. First one is, even if we're gonna require a patient to see their qualified medical provider, or recommending medical provider once a year, their card remains good for 2 years. I know there's at least one state that has cards that are valid for 2 years, just to find another way to reduce costs for patients. We talked about collaborations with the Center for Medical Cannabis. One thing that I think just continues to stigmatize cannabis is that when you travel with it in public, not only do you have to have it in its original packaging with all of the labels and all that, I get that, that's traditional pharmacy world. But to require you to carry it in an opaque bag or box, what do we do? Do we do that with any other medications? Do I have to? Yeah, when I leave Walgreens, they put it in a bag, but I could go out to my car and pull it out of there as long as it's in an original container, I'm fine. I just think that stigmatizes patients, and so I think we should get rid of the requirement that you have to travel with an opaque bag or box, regardless of whether a patient can bring that to the pharmacy. Bring back one of Dez's that she had from this past year, self-certification for patients over 65 years of age. And then I'd like to see the removal of background checks for caregivers, like we talked about before. So even if we don't end up making me re-certify our recommendations on some of those things.
We did make a recommendation on that.
I think we did.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just something we need to pick back up and like you said, when we go prior to the session to kind of send our recommendation letter, maybe.
Yeah.
We just reaffirm those. And then the other thing is public education. First of all, I want to make sure that any public education that's being created by the Department of Health and Human Services is actually being consulted with this group per 26B-4-247 2A. Just want to make sure of that. And then just some ideas around specific education, how to teach your kids about cannabis, right? This past session, we heard a ton about, youth use. Now, there is a federally funded study that recently came out that shows youth use is an all-time low. So despite some of the things you heard at the legislature this year, some of the data dictates otherwise. I know some of the rates in Utah that I've seen over time suggest, similar things, but still important. Kids need to understand, and learn about cannabis. Look, potency and purchase limits are going to be things that come up this year. Education, maybe this is something that just comes from industry, but maybe this is something the board could consider putting their own education around cannabis potency and purchase limits. Again, something that the departments might be able to help us with, facts around the safety of legal medical cannabis. I know we talked about UNAF potentially putting some education out about testing and what you all test for and why, how Dr. Brandon Forsyth has developed the most robust testing, program in America. We test for cannabinoids that most states do not. And just, I think putting that out there would be good. Educating generally on form factors, and responsible use around those things. How to educate, or, educating around encounters with law enforcement, right? That's a big one. And as a matter of fact, I'm putting a PowerPoint together right now for our own company because I've had multiple people ask me about it in the last week or so, not due to their own interactions, but just people generally, generally wonder. A general public awareness campaign around, do people know whether cannabis is even legal in Utah for medical purposes? I talked about responsible consumption. Risk of impaired driving, right? I think, while that varies, we don't have a specific way to test for it. I think this is somewhere where Jimmy could come in, and then, potential health risks associated with cannabis. Those are just some of the education ideas that I have. I think, we as a board should consider whether we want to put some of our own, education, out there and not just what the departments may or may not, do. So yeah, that's that's part of this.
Education, and I think not just public, but maybe law enforcement education, because I've heard some concerns around that and their knowledge, not any accusation, maybe they just don't have access. I know when I met with, sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
when
no,
I met with
no,
Jimmy, never seen a card.
Yeah.
A medical card. I mean, this was a while ago, but I know I
all the things I haven't seen.
To have experience and knowledge and seeing that, and I think even to judges and legislators, making sure that they understand cannabis. So I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about it.
Well, and I think you bring up a great point about the law enforcement. When Des and I and Alyssa, who now works for DHHS, had a chance to present to a gang unit conference, other than being somewhat appalled at the presentation by law enforcement, it was really, I think, important for them to see, us as either advocates or us as operators and talk about, hey, here's what a legal product looks like. As a matter of fact, an officer from a local PD came and visited our pharmacy the other day and said, hey, I pulled a guy over and he showed me this and claimed to have gotten this at a pharmacy. And I said, did not. I can just tell you from the melting face, smiley face on the front of the package, he did not, because I know neither Brandon nor Cody would have approved that for sale, but he.
Do you finally appreciate our packaging?
Yeah, exactly right. So I just think, and I even gave him my business card and said, hey, if you ever want me to come and present to the force. And so I think there would be an open invitation, whether for me or anyone else on the board, I can speak for anyone else to see themselves, would be willing to come and do that type of education. Because look, it's easy to get lost in the sauce when it comes to that stuff. Now you'd hope if you saw a dripping, cartoon face, you would think that's legal. But hey, if the person you pulled over says, I have a medical card and I bought this from a pharmacy, like, what are you gonna do? I mean, so it would just be good to do some education.
If we can maybe offline, get, because that was a lot of old.
Oh, yeah,
points, for
I'll
sure.
give you the whole list. man.
Yeah, so we can work offline to get those.
Yes.
From both of you.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, I think what
Education.
education is, that's more of a, there's sentence, I mean, that was gonna be one of my main points.
Yeah.
As well as education, I think I've talked about every single meeting, how do we get some more education out there and.
I think figuring out what would be best for them to come from us as a board, what we may want to involve certain industry members with, what we may be able to give to DHHS or UDAP's willing to do. Because I think the education we all can do will probably be different based upon our positions, within the program.
Yeah. Anything else? Go on.
Yeah, how long that list is.
I've seen Misty has her.
Misty, you have a hand?
I can't see her.
Yeah, this kind of ties into the polls we were talking about and possibly public education. But in my research for a grant I was recently writing, I saw a study out of California in 2023 where they saw over a 20-fold increase in emergency department admits for patients 65 and older associated with cannabis use. And I don't know if that's something that's unique to California or not, but is that something that would be worthwhile looking in Utah? Most of them, it seemed to be, were related to just misunderstanding packaging and whatnot. I don't know if there's something we should look at for that population, whether it be print size that, people with failing eyes can see with no problems. What are some of the special concerns for individuals 65 and older that may lead to increased risk in that special population?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share that study if you guys would like to see it.
I don't know if you guys saw it, but there was an article in Deseret News at the beginning of March that talked about cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. Which, I mean, it's common, I wouldn't say it's out there, but more and more people, well, it is rare. What I'm saying is common, it's becoming more common as more people use cannabis.
Right.
It's very rare for one person to have it, but the only way you get it is by using cannabis. So as people use cannabis, they realize they have it. And so it's just dealing with that. So I mean, education was not education, but it was out there in the Deseret News. There was a lot of comments and feedback on use. And I think one of the things that's going back on education I was going to bring up is, as I sat through all these board meetings and committee meetings up at the Capitol, a lot of comments came from, they essentially thought the medical cannabis program was just starting. And that if they wanted us, everyone to vote no on it because they thought the program was just going to go away. And again, it's just, again, it goes back to the education that, it's here, it's not going anywhere. I mean, we're in a very restricted market and not everyone qualifies for a medical card. And you have to have a qualifying condition, and people don't understand that. I think it's just even feedback I've gotten from legislators was that they didn't think the pharmacies were that busy because you just go pick up a prescription and it's ready for you to leave. Once you get from a doctor, and I had to educate them to know this, for very rare patients, this is an actual recommendation from a doctor saying you can have 10 milligram gummies. It's more of it's a license to shop, is what you're getting.
And the pharmacist is
The pharmacist is doing all that.
the vast majority of
Yes.
dosing and the form factor recommendations.
So they had no idea. They thought it was just like a CVS. Doesn't your doctor prescribe it and you just show up and it's ready? Well, I mean, it would be nice if it was that way, but that's not how this is.
And I think part of what we've seen in what we're welcoming is many folks that want to come and tour facilities. So again, to the board, some of you have been to our facility. If you haven't been to our pharmacy, you're welcome to come to our pharmacy if you want to see how it works. Obviously, DHHS and UNAF have an open invitation for law, so they can come whenever they would like. But anyone is welcome to come and see that process. I think, it's nice having a group of lawmakers that write all the bills and do this every year, but it would be nice to find, more folks that, are interested in at least, being better educated. Because the best example was 2 years ago when we ran the tax credit bill. The number of people that said openly that they had no idea what 280E is, and I understand if you don't do this for a living, like, you don't know what it is. It's a four-letter word in our industry, right? Especially if you're a pharmacy owner. But just that general education, I think, could be helpful. So maybe part of what we can do is commission, subcommittees within the group, say, hey, you're gonna put together a pamphlet on X. You have it ready at this board meeting to review, because I think we can impact policy, not just by saying, hey, we should allow X. You know what I mean? We vote to recommend this change in the law. I think we can also impact policy by better educating and better informing those that are going to, to pass the laws, because even those that work with us year in and year out, you still hear things that are not true. There were statements made this year that the cost of medical cannabis continues to rise in Utah. That's just not true. The data that DHHS summarized for UBAF showed that to be true, and our own data shows that. Now, maybe the prices haven't gotten to where patients want them to be, and I think that's still a lot of a role in the great conversation. But I also think we need to make sure that we're speaking on the facts are. So yeah, I think education is one place where we can be absolutely impactful without having to make one policy recommendation.
Anything else? From anyone? Those online? Thank you, Misty, for your comments.
I feel like you have
yeah. No. Oh, okay. Well, that's just another one of them. Mindy did raise her hand. She did it very small.
Yeah.
Do you want to come up to the table? I mean, I'll open it up for in-person public comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm Mindy Medeo from BI Pharmacy. I'm a pharmacist. This comment I wanted to prepare, it's more about something that passed in our legislation session that I think the board should be involved in. And this is allowing all providers to recommend medical cannabis. I think it's very important that we set it up in a way that is successful. And I've learned a lot of lessons from the LMP program, as I'm sure you guys have as well. But I want us to focus on three key areas as we're setting up the way the providers are going to recommend medical cannabis. Number one is education. So I think our education is lacking. I think there should be a one-pager with contraindications, benefits, and risks. And we have to make sure it's very fair and balanced. And I think that the CMCR is probably the best person to do this. But then I also believe that the health department needs to spend some money and spread this information to all providers. Number two, really important that we have simplicity. Our current program is very complicated. The LMP program is very complicated for a provider to make a recommendation. If we can create something that's very similar to how one is prescribes a Schedule 2, like OxyContin, where it's a very simple yes or no, you qualify for medical cannabis, this is the condition. And if they want to add specific recommendations, they can. Number three, I think this is going to free up a lot of time and effort with the health department and ag, is you can put more on the pharmacist's shoulders. So for example, with a Schedule 2, a pharmacist will get a piece of paper with the order. They'll fill the order, they'll file it away. Right now we have the Department of Health looking at all of the, is it okay if I can have more time, please?
Yep.
Just finish, thank you. So what I'm suggesting is rather than have a complicated form that gets uploaded in EVS, if we can just trust that a pharmacist will look at an order, they are trained to assess the validity of it. Sorry, I couldn't say that word. A forgery is going to be very, very uncommon with a medical cannabis recommendation. I'm afraid that we're going overboard trying to put all these things in place that is just making barriers for providers to recommend medical cannabis. So yeah, I think that I would love to help set up a system that works. And I really believe that our best cannabis program is going to be one where your primary care provider recommends cannabis along with all your other medications, and there's no charge for it. So if we could figure out a way to let providers feel confident that they're not going to get in trouble, that they're not going to have to pay more for their insurance, and just make them feel comfortable. We don't, and again, I want it to be very fair and balanced with a lot of factual information. So thank you.
Any other agenda items from some of the board would like to get added? Okay. I think we should have. So are there any rules that need to be added around that change? Rich, as far as for recommending medical providers on?
No,
Because essentially, just, you know.
what we're
required to
removing
register,
some rules.
right? Yeah, so remove those, but essentially it's removing the requirement to register. I mean, you still have to take your CE credits and some of them have to be in cannabis, but it's essentially just was removing registration requirement, right?
Right.
What is that going to do for your website that shows where they can get their medical cards if they're not registering?
The QMP list.
So the statute still states that if a medical provider wants their name to be on our website,
Okay.
we can
You
post
can
it, so we'll continue to do it. Yeah.
How is that maintained today? Like, is it if their registration's not active, they get removed?
Uh-huh.
Okay, but so essentially now, because there's no registration, that will stay the same unless they request to be removed.
That go out with the email, that's gonna go out to all the providers, the RMPs that you're writing
Yeah.
on.
Sounds like you got a great list to choose the agenda for next.
Oh, don't worry. Well, this is my next item is, I mean, there's a lot of items that are on here. One of the things is we want to kind of make sure that, as board members, that you guys are able to participate. We'll probably typically in our meeting with Desiree and I and those that are in, and we'll talk through who do we want to present or thing. Trevor will reach out to you. I might recommend, try to mix it up and get someone involved. If you have time to help, I would like to see maybe 2 or people per item, not necessarily both presenting, but just so we can kind of get both side type of ideas on it. As much as I love the sound of the similar voices that we hear every time, I'd like to hear others. So, yes.
Do you have a narrative?
Oh, we do the narrative. Interesting.
Yeah, narrative. I didn't say a narrative.
Oh.
The one and only.
Yeah, we'll invite Nareth to make a comment and then we'll.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I apologies if I missed this. It was already on the list, but I did want to bring up a topic to discuss as part of the future agenda, and that is a conversation around Schedule 3. I know there's a lot of things that could still happen with this current administration, but Schedule 3 is still on the docket for conversation, and I think it has a lot of implications into the way that our program also runs. So I think being proactive about what the implications of Schedule 3 looks like, what does a world of Schedule 3 look like? How does DHHS, UDAF, industry, patient advocates look at Schedule 3? And what are the things that we can already start implementing towards that fashion? We're already making great strides towards it, but I think it definitely behooves us to continue to stay in front of that. So.
Yeah, and actually, I think we had that on our agenda at one time, and we were gonna come back to it. I think the way, I think Misty talked about it was having each one of us from our own lane discuss what the impact would be in a Schedule 3 world. I mean,
any hearings or
just so everyone is clear where we are in the process of it, is they had hearing scheduled for January, an appeal was filed aimed at the DEA for inappropriate conduct in terms of their communications with witnesses and their witness list. And so that appeal is pending. The administrative law judge overseeing the hearings asked for updates every 90 days. So until the appeal is resolved, nothing can move forward. But I think he raises a good point, because as it still stands, that's where we're headed. And honestly, I think generally we should be doing a review of the laws and the regulations here in Utah to see if it does go to Schedule 3. Now, there's a whole lot of what ifs, but if it's treated like a Schedule 3 substance, what can we remove from our regulations? How can we change our regulations? How does the law need to change? Is this something we do for another Schedule 3 substance? Or is this even something we do, because I know Utah views medical cannabis as a Schedule 2 substance. Should we, do Schedule 2 facilities have to have 90 some cameras in their facility? I don't know, maybe they do, right? I think that's something generally we should look at as a group. is if we're gonna treat cannabis like any other kind of controlled substance, we should do it in all facets. So I was gonna add that to the list at some point.
All right, get that added. Thank you, Dareth. All right, if there's not any other agenda
Yeah.
items. Oh,
Can I add?
yeah, go ahead.
Actually, if I can add to that, I agree with Nareth and JD completely. And to reiterate what I said in a past meeting, I think it would really add a lot for each of us to bring something from our areas of specialty. Because Schedule 3 is going to affect all of us a little bit differently. And I think getting everybody's perspective is really going to be valuable and important in any of the discussions, because as a researcher, it's going to have impacts on me somewhat differently than the patient population versus the care providers, so on and so forth. So I think everybody's input's going to be valuable in this and diverse.
All righty.
Matt, just a quick question,
Yeah.
if I could add.
Yeah.
Some of the board members might have been privy to some of the conversations with lawmakers and about what their plans are for interim. I wasn't a part of those, but you may have been. Because that may, those
Yeah, I mean-
topics may be topics that you
You
want to
want to recommend it?
mirror
And
as
I know
well.
that the governance working group, has been extended again, so as soon as we get dates for those.
Their first one's typically in August.
Yeah, so we should be cognizant of when those will start
Yeah.
to come up, so we can maybe make recommendations and get on, on the agenda, other than when they generally invite you and Des to come up and give it.
Well, it'll be a new chair and vice chair at that point. It will be. It will be.
And we'll have certain new board members come July, right? Rather than July meeting.
It's
or
been
August.
2 years.
Yeah, I think three of the members are to 2 years,
Right.
so.
But that's just something probably,
But I-
we don't have to take agenda items or that, just I think make raise a really good point from a just kind of scheduling and logistics perspective.
Right.
And so it's good.
So it's just you,
So it's
but
just me that reads the note in June.
you don't have to leave because we're flowers.
I was gonna answer.
Well, he does have to open it up, but.
So Rich, are you probably asking for interim study issues now? Cause I know for us, we're already being asked when our deadlines are April.
Yeah, so they ask those from lawmakers, and sometimes they'll reach out to the department and ask, but as members of the industry and patient advocates and substance use disorder facilities, you may have items that you could reach out to your own lawmakers to propose. And then also just another question that I had, does the Utah Cannabis Association still operate? Is there, no?
I think there's a loose association of operators.
Okay,
I don't know if any of those of the two entities that existed, whether they still formally, operate in this group.
okay,
I guess you're talking
The
about
co-op and association and all have gone.
Yeah, it's for the most part, I think,
Yeah.
operators for each of those groups have been meeting with one another.
right, okay. That's all.
All right, well, with that, we'll just move on to, we'll skip number 8, because we talked, then we have agenda items, and number 7. And we'll go right to the last item, which is adjourning. So all those in favor? It wasn't bad. Regardless, we're still close. Thank you very much, you guys.
I didn't hear any